Good morning. It's Tuesday, July 18th. We're here for our regular scheduled board meeting. We have a full slate of commissioners. We have our administrator and the clerk of the board. At this time, I'll call the meeting to order and ask everyone to please rise and join in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, the first item on the agenda is approval of the vouchers. I believe we have one today.
Move for approval of fund expenditures in a total amount of $295,642.13 as presented, and note that it has been reviewed and signed by two representatives of the auditor's office and the county administrator.
Just noting before the meeting that the voucher is not signed off by the county administrator, but since it's been motioned that he has, I just would like to know if it's been through the county administrator yet.
Honestly, I don't want to say for sure.
Okay.
If I haven't signed it,
This is the one you want to listen to.
yeah.
And you can adjust that for whatever volume you need.
Yes, I actually have
Yeah,
taken a
you
look
wanna
at
see,
this, so.
Second.
Okay, he has now signed it. We have a motion and a second for the approval of the voucher. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Moves us down to the approval of the consent agenda. There are 5 items on the consent agenda.
And usually what I'll do too is I would put a check mark each time we're on something or it's just been finished. So you could put a check mark at the end.
Whoever's joined in the employee line, can you please unmute yourself? You are not muted at the moment. Thank you.
Move for approval of consent agenda items 1 through 5 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for the 5 consent items with no discussion. All in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Takes us down to regular business. First item is Ms. Wilder, Resolution 2023-203, utilization of American Rescue Plan Act funds for retention incentive.
Is on. Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning.
Yes, this resolution and ASR is for the retention incentive. Sorry, I can't see with my glasses. For the majority of the eligible employees to use roughly 1.5 million of the ARPA funds to grant a $5,000 one-time payment for employees to maintain with the county for the next year, or it would be they would have to pay that back. Do you have any questions?
Questions,
Sorry,
commissioners?
You said, or we have to pay it back. The expiration date on these funds is December of 26, is it?
I am not positive.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Oh, when you said pay it back, you were referencing the retention bonus. I'm sorry.
Yes, that is correct.
I was thinking in a broader context of how long the county has to use this money before we have to potentially give it back.
Okay.
Who all is eligible for the 5,000?
Excuse me, let me put my glasses on. So the non-eligible employees would be the elected officials, non-benefited employees, the deputy prosecutors, because they are receiving the 10% already, employees that are retiring, and employees that would be separating from Franklin County. With the idea to retain our employees, any one of those, well, especially the employees that are separating or retiring, they may not be here for the year, so we wouldn't be retaining
Sure.
their employment.
Oh, thank you for the clarification.
You're welcome.
And it does state frontline employees. So are we talking that the department heads would also receive this, or
you said all elected officials will not, but what about the department heads? I think this is more of a leadership. We take care of the people that are not making the big salaries, is what I was hoping that we were going to do with this, all the hardworking people of the courthouse. And higher earners would not participate, especially department heads, elected officials. So are the department heads also entitled to this?
Do you want to elaborate on that, or do you want me to?
Yeah, at this point they are, and I know there's been a lot of debate about this, and we've talked about it, Commissioner, and I did run this by our department heads in our meeting on Monday, and we spoke about it pretty robustly the prior Monday as well. And the overwhelming feeling was, department heads, in their view, do deserve this retention pay. They're leading the ship. They're setting the tone for morale. They certainly make a higher wage than some of the people that they're directing. And as we looked at some of the salaries with Margot and I, and there are some out of balance pays where people with actually lower ranks are making higher than some of the department heads. So, it's one of those sticky wickets you can get into and say, well, who should we exclude and who shouldn't we? I'm not going to take the retention bonus. I feel blessed. I make enough, but I do feel like my department heads deserve it, as does everybody in this courthouse. In a certain sense, that are grinding away, and I think it's an opportunity to bring the morale up, and especially in light of the Consor study. We're looking at the salary structures. We're looking at the salary study. So I think in good faith, this holds the line in terms of raises and the direction that we're heading. So and it's been much thought and a lot of good conversation about this. So I don't want anybody in the public to think, this was, hey, everybody's just, we're out to get a raise for our employees. I mean, this has been well thought out, and I do think our department heads deserve it, although many do make a good wage, but they're working hard, and they're leading their troops really well.
And the whole idea behind this is retention.
Absolutely, and I think that's the other thing, is we want to retain our department heads. We've got some really good department heads with institutional knowledge that we want to keep, and they have to maintain and set the tone for morale. So I think it does set a good tone, because myself, I went back and forth on it. Should our department heads get it? But when I saw their faces and when it was articulated to me the way they felt about it, because they care they care about their employees too. I want to send that message as well. But for me, I do think it's important that they're eligible as well.
Is there any other questions?
Not a question, but a few observations. I want to start by just offering a few thoughts on the whole notion of using ARPA funds in this fashion and the idea of retention bonus and using ARPA funds to do it. So I'll start out with, I think the proposal, as well intended as it is a Band-Aid, and it's not a solution to the real problem. In fact, it only kicks the can down the road. I don't believe that $5,000 on annual salary is sufficient to be a determinative amount for someone who's seeking higher ongoing salary at another employer. I say it that way because we've been told that people aren't leaving because of morale issues. I disagree with that assessment, but that's what we've been told. But if you buy that notion, then it means they're leaving for higher salaries. And if somebody can go to another county or another location, the likelihood that it's going to be for a salary that's at least $5,000 more. So the idea of using this as a retention amount, I think, functionally doesn't work. Especially when you're looking at those individuals that are seeking better or different working environment. We've had a number of employees who frankly have left, and I shouldn't say a number, we've had some, I don't know exactly how many, but I do know of some who have left for lower paying jobs elsewhere for a variety of reasons. So I don't think this money is likely to actually retain employees who aren't already intending to stay with the county. It is public money. We should be making the most of it, and not wanting to disagree with someone else's proposal without offering my own. I would say that I think a better use of these ARPA funds would be to use them to fund existing approved county expenditures. And then the funds that are displaced or saved in the county budget should go into a contingency account for 2024. And the purpose of that contingency account is so that when this consor study is done, we'll actually have money sitting in escrow in a contingency account to do pay raises consistent with a consor study from day one. You've all heard me talk for several weeks now about my concerns about constraints on revenue next year and beyond. And we can offer up a $5,000 incentive today, but I think this money is better spent to escrow it and to be money that we have on hand to actually do pay increases when we get the consor study. Because I think if we don't do that, we will get the consor study and we will look at the budget and we'll find out that we don't have the money to do the pay raises we want to do. And then the alternative is you either pay fewer people more or you keep the same number of employees and continue to pay them about the same. So this really is about where do we get the most effective use of these dollars. It still goes to the employees, but do you hand it out as an incentive across the board without even knowing if even 10% of those people are thinking about leaving? Or do you set it aside in a contingency fund so that you actually have money to start pay raises next year instead of a year or two after? That's my view. Thanks.
Well, I believe the whole intent was to basically ask for more time because we've went with the new study. The employees here have been very patient, is how I would put it. And it's probably not a fix, but it is definitely saying we are working on it and please be patient with us. And this is a way of showing them and giving them some latitude, some gratitude as far as we are trying to take care of the employees here.
So, Mr. Gonzalez, I'm looking here, and the retention is through what date?
So essentially, let's say August 1 to 2023 to August of 2024. So
Okay.
it does, in fact, it will retain individual employees for a year unless they choose to pay back that money. So
Exactly. All righty. So I was trying to get the date when this retention would run out. So it'd be August of 2024.
yes, sir. And I do think a contingency fund and the idea Commissioner Peck floated was, I think, a solid one. But you look at some multitude of issues that we have going on here. Before Sam, the prior HR director, left, she said we had more than 40 people leave in between 2022 to 2023 when I arrived. So, and I think there's multiple factors that affect that. It's lack of pay that affects morale, that affects retention. So it's sort of a cyclical thing. I mean, you look at what happened up in the clerk's office. A raise was given, it was pulled. That affects morale, and I mean they're still scarred from that issue. So I do think this is a step in the right direction. It sends a good message that we care about our employees, that we want you to stay, that we are taking measures to make things better here. So
The whole intent for the ARPA funds was to go to the employees, is that correct?
the initial intent of ARPA when the pandemic hit was to retain employees and, as a stopgap measure, and that legislation is essentially still in effect and has been utilized all across Washington State.
Actually, I believe the original intent was, as defined in their term frontline workers, those workers who early in the pandemic were working under additional complications of masks and distancing and separation and potentially taking on higher health risk in doing it. That's when the funds were targeted at individuals. And then over the succeeding 2 years, that purpose got broadened to the point where today you can use it for most legitimate county expenses. That's where the frontline worker term actually came from.
So
I would
before
like
we-
to know, Mr. Gonzalez, how many employees do you anticipate the county would likely lose over the next year if we didn't have this incentive? How many employees do you think this will actually retain?
I think we'd probably lose another 35%.
Okay, so
So,
Commissioner Peck, I believe Commissioner Mullen had the floor. You didn't ask the chair for recognition. Commissioner Mullen was in the middle of questioning Mr. Gonzalez. I'd like to hear Commissioner Mullen finish, please, before you interrupt
great,
him.
I thought he was finished. My
No,
apologies.
he was not.
Some of these ARPA funds have been rumored to be pulled back, is that correct? If they're not
Yeah,
spent?
there was a notion that they would be clawed back, and I think that was primarily in some really large cities. They had held on to that funding, and I mean, kind of in simplest terms, they stuck it in a bank. They were
Collecting
They were
interest.
collecting interest. So that hasn't happened here because we've done a pretty good job of allocating where those ARPA funds are going. And so that was really the intent of the federal government. They were looking at, hey, if we gave you $18 million and it's still in your bank account, you better start using it, or there is that potential. So, I mean, we've done a great job, I think, here at the county and utilizing the funds as effectively as we can. So I think in our case, it's very slim that they would claw back this money.
But it's not something we can just put in a bank account and sit on.
No, it's we want to utilize them as effectively as we can, and as Commissioner Peck mentioned, we have till December of 2026 to spend them. I mean, I'd rather spend them and be proactive than with the potential, because you never know with the feds. They could come back and they say one thing and they do another, so you might as well utilize them as effectively as you possibly can.
And I would agree that the whole intent is basically asking all the hardworking employees here to be patient with us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'd note that Commissioner Mullen is not in the practice of asking for the chair's approval to have the floor, and until we are consistent in our rules, I'll continue to speak. Mr. Gonzalez, the 35% that you cited would be roughly 80 to 90 employees. How many have we lost in the last year?
I'd have to check that with Margot. And
Or do you
when
have a rough estimate?
I don't, unfortunately, I'm sorry.
and
Would you agree it's probably less than 20?
Maybe, yeah.
I would think it's in that realm,
Yeah.
which is a normal attrition for us. So back to my earlier question, and first off, with respect to the funds, if we've obligated those for employee salaries starting in 2024, then the risk of the government taking those funds back goes away. They're obligated funds, and we could simply put that in our budget. Want to be clear, it isn't that I think our employees aren't deserving. It's that I'm of the opinion that at least 80% of the people that this money would be going to are not at risk of departing. And when we pay incentives to people who are not at risk of departing, and it's a retention incentive, that says that we're spending 80% of that chunk of public money for a purpose that is not likely to achieve any effect. But if we take 100% of that money and we put it into salaries in 2024 increases, that lets us either start salaries sooner or make them more significant. And I think all the employees of the county, if presented with those two options, would probably think, you know, I'd rather avoid the risk of a delayed salary increase and start it next year. So the purpose here is not to try and diminish the value of the employees or take away something that they're hoping to receive, but in fact, give them a much better probability of a pay increase and making those pay increases consistent with this consort study that's coming up because we're going to find out that we've got some employees that are fairly compensated, and we've got some that are well undercompensated. And it's going to be difficult for us to explain if we do the study and come 2024, we have to then say, yeah, we still think you're underpaid, but we don't have the money to pay you after we've just spent $1.5 million, 80% of it going to people that weren't leaving anyway. So that's all I'm saying. Thank you.
So, Mr. Gonzalez, if they take this retention pay, they cannot, and how does this work with the union? Maybe, Margot, you're better to answer this.
We-
Can we make them pay that back if they're with a union?
We did reach out to all of the unions, the groups, and there was no, they were all okay with the agreement of where it would have to pay back. One of the union leaders did indicate that's pretty consistent across the board for the other departments within the state that he was aware of that was doing the retention incentive. So that wasn't an issue. If I might, in regards to the union, if this doesn't pass, and I mean, of course, that's your choice, I would be a little cautious about the unions and the fact that there are employees that are aware that this is coming to the board for a possibility, and I have received several calls asking when this might take place. So if we were to go back, it's just we have to go back to all the unions again and let them know, because we can't just switch and do something else automatically, at least.
So we're going to have these employees through 2024, August of 2024. If they leave, they got to pay it back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
So I would add to this discussion then,
Mr. Peck, do you want the floor?
I believe I have the floor until we use the same rules for everybody.
We're going to have our rules of conduct next meeting. We have that all drawn up. I want that before the board next meeting.
Good.
Yes, sir.
It'd be good if you coordinate that in advance so that we have a chance to read them before the meeting. So I'm curious, the plan for the retention is that if somebody leaves before the full year, they have to give back the $5,000. It's my premise that if somebody is leaving for reasons of dissatisfaction with the working environment or conditions, that $5,000 is not going to be sufficient to keep them here. If they're going to another county or job for a compensation increase, my guess is that $2,500, which would be, or even the $5,000, probably is not a compelling number if you're going to another job because it pays more. So the effectiveness of a retention at $5,000 to me seems improbable, and I'm still bothered by the fact that 80% of the people notionally receiving the incentive, functionally or practically speaking, have no intention of leaving anyway. And that's why I think communicating to the employees that instead of doing this across the board, we're going to dedicate these funds to pay raises that can be effective, frankly, as soon as we want them to be, but it makes sense to do it with a 2024 calendar, which is 5 months away. So I can understand people wanting the money today, especially if they don't have any intention of leaving. I think we ought to be more strategic in our practices. This is a very tactical approach, targeting 100% of our money at really 10 to 20% of the workforce. Thanks.
Is there any other discussion?
Yes, I'll ask for the floor. My personal thoughts on the 5,000 are normally I wouldn't be for it, but the fact that the employees have been extremely patient, that this consort study isn't going to come out for another year, I think it shows good faith that we are trying to work and show the employees that we are thankful for their work and service here. Again, and it's to wait a year for the study to come out, I think is over and above what our employees should be asked to wait for, so. Those are my thoughts on it.
So, Mr. Gonzalez, I think you previously told us that the Consor study is going to front-load the salary review piece.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And when does the study start?
It's already started.
And didn't you previously tell us that they estimated that the salary piece was going to take 3 or 4 months?
Probably a couple months, maybe
Okay.
3 maximum.
So it put us right in the middle of the
And
budget
that's
cycle.
what I wanted. I wanted the timing to be right. in
Yeah,
the
so that
budget
put
season.
us right in the middle of the budget cycle. So employees wouldn't have to wait a year to hear this. In fact, we would get the salary study in the middle of the current budget cycle, and we'd have $1.5 million extra dollars sitting there to do those salary increases with. So I think the timing is actually quite good. But I'm also aware of the realities of board votes when you have 3 members. So I think it's important to let the employees know that this is not attempting to take something away. It's frankly trying to give them the funds for salary increases and more in a more strategic way, because this incentive obviously goes away in a year. Salary increases continue. Thanks.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. But it's already July, and the employees have been patient for over the past 6 months, so.
So we'd have that salary info in about 2 months, you said?
Should be 2 to 3 months. I
Board
don't-
could enact salary increases at that point?
I mean, ultimately, for Commissioner Peck to say 80% of the folks here are staying as if it was a fact, I mean, we don't know that. I mean, that's conjecture. One thing I do know are trends and feelings and the feelings like our employees been kicked in the gut. I mean, for even us to have this conversation, it's a good one, but I mean, the message that we're sending again, morale's crap here. And we need to pick it up. This sends a damn message that we care about our employees. That's what it does. And honestly, I got nothing else to say about it.
Well, I appreciate your candor. I'll note that it's wholly inconsistent with the good vibe speeches we've received over the last few months, but that's an observation that any of us is entitled to make. The notion of 80% not intending to leave, I intentionally said was notional, and I predicated it on the discussion with Margot about how many people have left in the past year during this period where morale is, to quote you, crap. Thank you.
When we continue to have these kind of discussions, yeah, we have pockets of happiness here. Yeah, there's good people here. There are that want the best for the county.
I agree. And I'm
They
trying
really
to
are.
I'm trying to improve their lot on an ongoing, permanent basis, not a
And so am I.
one-time.
Every day I'm in the weeds.
I mean, with respect to this
If there is no
package.
other discussion about the, I'd entertain a motion.
Move for approval of Resolution 2023-203 as presented.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second for Resolution 2023-203. Is there any further discussion?
I'll be voting nay on the simple premise that I think this money could be better spent to give employee pay increases 60 to 90 days from now when the Consor study is done, which would be an ongoing benefit as opposed to a one-time retention, when I think any reasonable person can assume that at least some of that retention money is going to employees who have no intention of leaving. It's public money. We should make the most of it. Thank you.
There's no further comment. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Nay?
Let the record be known. It's passed. Moves us down to Resolution 2023-204, one-time retention payment equal to 10% of the current salary for each of the following deputy prosecuting attorneys, presented by Mr. Sant.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is basically this very similar proposal that was before the board previously.
Yeah, we already passed it, I thought.
We did, and there's a couple changes. One, we have had a deputy that was named by name in that previous resolution who is leaving. I also wanted to change and make consistent with the language that, if you noticed in the previous agreement for the other employee retention, it's a full year. Our language in our previous submitted resolution that was passed was a pro rata share. And I think consistent with the board's discussion, if this is truly to be an incentive of retention and retaining employees for the full year, it seems like this has to be an all or nothing, which is consistent with the other agreement that the other employees would be signing. The date of effect of this, or the effective date of the year, is once the employees sign that gets turned into HR and to the auditor's office for payment. And once they receive it, that's the language. That year begins upon their receipt of payment. So I think the estimate was that this would come out in August. But the main incentive change here is that this is trying to retain folks for a year. Losing another DPA, we have a couple more that are coming on in August. Before they could be fully functional, they're going to have to get results of the bar that they are taking at the end of this month. And so really this is the same resolution that was passed. It takes off one of the names that was previously listed because that individual is leaving for another county's position. And I believe that this incentive language, making it consistent with the same kind of agreement that all the other employees would have to sign upon receiving that, is consistent. And it has a greater impact, I think, on gaining the retention for the full year, because they would have to then forego the 10% if they left prior to a year. If they leave on month 11th, they're going to have to repay the full 10% incentive. So again, I think this is structured to really fulfill the better interest for the taxpayers, provide the retention that we need for our office, because obviously we still are struggling. We're losing another, these were planned, we're losing another DPA at the end of this week, and then we'll lose the latest one at the end of next week. So anyway, it's a pretty significant loss on our criminal side of the house. So we're asking the board to just simply adopt this resolution. It does have the language that this would rescind the earlier resolution, so that this would be the language going forward, and it would be effective upon the signature of the DPAs that agree to that, receiving that 10% incentive.
Questions?
For clarity, they would not be eligible for the $5,000 retention.
That's correct. That's correct. I think one of the things that did come up is because we do have some newer employees that are coming, and I'm finding as I'm trying to reach out and market and recruit folks, we may have to come back to the board and request a separate resolution upon that would be applicable to new incoming employees. For instance, I think the agreement or the discussion with the board was that you wouldn't be eligible for both. In other words, if you're getting this incentive, clearly you wouldn't be eligible for the $5,000. But one of the things that we may need to come back to the board would be perhaps requesting that same retention incentive for new recruits. If I'm able to get someone to be able to come in and start with us, if we could offer them that same 10% upon them agreeing to stick around for a year, that might be something that we need to consider in the near future. But as of now, it was designed so you'd only be eligible for the one incentive and not both.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So we passed this, and we've already lost another attorney.
That's right. Sounds like that was in the works prior to us getting that resolution even before the board.
Mr. Sant, how many DPAs do you have, deputy prosecuting attorneys?
Currently, or like how many FTEs are we slated for?
FTEs.
We're slated for 12 plus myself.
And
We would be down essentially 7 on the criminal side. But we have incoming folks that are replacing some of the departures. They will be starting as Rule 9s, which is basically a limited license. It allows them to practice under the supervision of an attorney.
So your civil DPAs, if I'm doing the math right in my head, you've lost 60% of that targeted population in the last several months?
And this would be 70% with the latest
With the
departure.
latest.
When we presented last time, it was 6 out of 10, and now it would be 7 out of 10. But we've also been able to bring another DPA that started today, who was previously with our office, and we also started a Rule 9 DPA last week.
Are those employees leaving for dissatisfaction of the work or work environment, or is it compensation, or do you not know?
Well, when we did an exit interview with the folks that are leaving, it was basically better opportunities. One left to, obviously, salary is a big factor in this, but this was an opportunity. One took a job with a private law firm. That's, I used to work with one of the main partners of that firm, so I understand the desire to get kind of that different experience going private practice. The others have left for either a contract with OPD. One of them took a contract with OPD in this county, which was really the biggest frustration because that person was hired on. Essentially, they just got their bar license and they were basically moved across the scale because of the needs of another department within the same county. So that individual, of course, recognizing that that was about a 37% increase, they'd be foolish not to take that opportunity. So they left for OPD there. The other individual took an OPD contract as an in-house OPD attorney for Benton County, and obviously it was a combination. They were making more money, but also it was a position that enabled flexibility, where they would only have to be basically going to court the 1 day a week, and then of course they would meet with clients as necessary, but it offered a lot more flexibility than I can. Most of my deputies have to be working here in the office and doing the work that we need to do on a weekly basis, and so I can't offer that kind of flexibility. So some things are out of my realm. Obviously, when they could make more money elsewhere and gain flexibility on top of it, I've tried to be as best of a manager as possible by creating flexibility within our office, working around schedules, but obviously we have work that needs to be done here, and I only have so much control on the salary side. So we try to do what we can there. And again, when we presented a couple weeks ago, the idea was to give time for the consor study. And I think that's what this was doing, is basically showing that, look, employees, give us a year. We believe, I'm hopeful that we'll have some early indications in the next 2 to 3 months of where that goes. I think that puts us in line for the budget season, where people will be able to see where we are for next year. But I'm also hopeful that that study also brings about a much more lasting reflection of what we need to do for compensation to retain attorneys, so we don't have this shortage in the future.
I'd be inclined to make them part of the retention. If the Conor study is going to be back in 3 months, we give them the same amount, and that way they're included, and then we see what the study says.
In terms of
Of
his
10%
DPAs.
on their salaries, yeah.
Right, and I think that's the intent, was the clarity on Sean's part. We've had a couple conversations about this, and I think what this amendment does is it locks his DPAs in
For a year, which
yeah.
it would do under the other one we just
Right.
passed.
Exactly. So I mean, we certainly could make amendments. And correct me if I'm wrong, Sean. We were going to sort of prorate if somebody intended to leave, but obviously, the more you have to pay back, the more incentive there is to stay.
And this is why we changed
Right.
it, because the language in we were requested, or our office was
Right.
working on the retention agreement for the other employees, and it seemed consistent to adopt the same
Right.
language for DPAs as well. So they would have to remain with the county for the full year. If they leave earlier, they repay the full 10%.
Right, which I think is a good policy on our part, because right now, as we know, DPAs they're at a premium, And
And this is creating the retention as a true incentive to stay
absolutely.
on for the year. If you have to leave pro rata, if people have better opportunities, even the 10% is probably not going to retain, but if they had to repay all of that
Right.
back, if they leave at month 6 or 10, I think it might have folks reconsider their position. And really what I'm trying to do is buy us time to get the results of the consort study so that this incentive prevents the loss right now, but hopefully it also gives them time and comfort knowing that we're going to have a study that's going to have recommendations for the 24 and beyond budget years. So I think that'll
Absolutely.
give us further direction.
Is there any other discussion?
I would just like to say, I guess it's my thought that, again, that the employees have been extremely patient, and we've got ourselves in this situation to where I believe we need to show the employees that we are grateful and thankful for their hard work. And maybe it's just me, but I know how slow government moves, and I don't feel comfortable asking everybody to keep waiting for an unknown study to, there's not a definite timetable of when it will be finished. So I will move to approve Resolution 2023-204 as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion and a second for 2023-204. Discussion.
I just offer that incentives can be appropriate when you're dealing with high-risk functions like legal, civil affairs, criminal prosecution. When you have 60 to 70% of your difficult to find and difficult to retain workforce depart within a matter of months, that rises to the level of crisis that really requires some immediate intervention. Keeping in mind that attorneys have the equivalent of PhDs or Juris Doctorates. There aren't a lot of them out there, and we can't do the core business of Franklin County without those functions being filled. So in this case, I think a targeted incentive probably does make sense.
I'm inclined to keep all the employees in the same category. They're all important for the survival of Franklin County's government, and therefore I'd be more inclined to vote for them to be included into the same resolution that we've already passed. So if there's no other discussion, all in favor say aye.
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 All opposed? Nay. It passes. Moves us down to public comment.
We have one other resolution on.
Is there a third one on there? Here I go. Okay. Excuse me, Resolution 2023-202, approval of step increase to step 6 corrections.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Morning.
So, I wanted to come talk to you about moving an employee who's been with us for a year from a step 3 to a step 6. And the employee's a female, and she had been working with DOC prior to coming to us, and she's a hard worker. And I would like, just to tell you where I'm at with this is, this is my 8th facility that I've worked at. And when I arrived in 2018, for the county, and I started working on the floor as an officer, and I can't remember what I started to pay at, but, it's a job and we'll get it done. I've never met such hardworking people in my life that works for us, for Franklin County. And, and to have somebody who's leaving DOC to come here and work for us, and then being offered $5 more elsewhere, like right across the river, to come work, and because they're hurting for females as well. And to hear the state's giving their employees another 12% on top of the 22% that they've given, and she's willing to stay here and work for us because she likes working here, is kind of where she's at, and where I believe the sheriff's office is at too. And to retain her would be great, because she does want to work here. And the other problem that we have is it's hard to find people who want to come to a county and they see the pay and they see the benefits and they immediately go, time out, especially if they work somewhere else. And to have someone who's saying to me and to the sheriff, hey, I like working here. I want to stay here. Other places are offering me more pay and better benefits, but I would love to stay here. And to retain people, especially, going on 5 years to 15 years is quite a feat in corrections, especially. A lot of people, they tend to move, they tend to go elsewhere, and to have somebody who's willing to say, hey, I love working here is awesome. And so that's why I'm here to present to you that we move her from a step 3 to a step 6 if we possibly could. I know there was an issue with the numbers and stuff, and I think I had the numbers at 91, 98, and I believe I was just calculating for the whole pay for a year of the increase of 67,438. So I can correct that if I need to.
Questions?
So, Commander Harmon, the 91, 98 would be for an entire year. And did I hear you say it was 6,000 some for the remainder of this year?
Yeah, so when I calculated that 91, 98, I did it for as if it was a whole year.
Right.
So the increase is going to be a little less than that with what we have left in
Less than half,
Yeah.
because we're more than halfway
And
through
then,
the year.
we can absorb
Okay.
that through, we're down 10 positions, and we've been down worse than that for this year, with people leaving to other police agencies and other corrections facilities. So I believe we can absorb it that way.
What do you feel is the necessary number of female corrections officers, and how many do we currently have?
So right now, not off the top of my head, I believe we are sitting at about 10 female corrections officers. I know of one that's possibly leaving us, going to Richland Police Department, and good candidate, good person, and it's and I believe that because I've done a lot of the backgrounds and stuff on a lot of the candidates that show up. That's the number one thing, is they look at the pay. I've had so many phone calls where people call me and say, hey, I want to come work for you, but you're starting me out at $25. And they look at working at Target or somewhere else where they start them out at $25. And the notion of coming into a facility and working where you're dealing with the people that we don't want on the streets, and having to work with them every day, and they pass. They say, that's not what I want to do. And I know it's tough for the young people coming in, and they see that amount that they're getting paid, and they ask if they can negotiate. That's not how we do things as far as negotiations go. Mm-hmm. But the female corrections officers are hard to find. They really are.
I was attempting to at least mentally make a parallel between civil deputy prosecuting attorneys, which are critical to our function, female corrections officers who are critical to our meeting our function and our statutory obligations. And I think you said you had approximately 10.
Right.
I was just wondering if we were fully staffed in female corrections officers, would that be 20? Would it be 11? How close are we to be fully staffed? And keep in mind, I was drawing the parallel with deputy prosecuting attorneys, where I think fully staffed for them is 12, and I think Mr. Sant said they've lost 70% or something, some
Right.
tremendous number. So what would be a full complement of female
So for
corrections
female
officers?
staff, it would definitely be around 15 if we could.
Okay.
I know that's not possible with everybody around us giving increases in pay. They'll go elsewhere, Yakima, Benton County, Walla Walla.
Well, that's helpful, because obviously you've got a workforce that is difficult to recruit, difficult to retain, short supply. And if you told me that a full complement's 11 and you have 10, I'd be a lot less concerned. But what I've heard you say is you're about 33% down of what would be ideal. Okay. The other questions I have revolve around the stepping from a 3 all the way to a 6. This individual, it looks like from the read ahead, has 4 years of experience. Excuse me, 3 at the state facility at Coyote Ridge and 1 here. Good experience. I don't know, and maybe you could tell me, how much more difficult is it for us, Franklin County, to recruit experienced corrections officers as opposed to entry level?
So yeah, it's to have a corrections officer lateral into us, even at this step 3, I think it's $28 right now. They're not doing it. They can go lateral at Benton County, for instance, and they're starting about $5 above that 28 that we offer here. And Chelan County, I know that their commissioners, to retain their corrections officers, they had a proposal of 32% to retain their people, and I do know it passed. And it's the same thing with DOC. They, like I said earlier, they gave their employees just corrections, not CCOs or counselors or anything like, just the COs. They gave them another 12% on top of their 22 that they received to retain them this year. So that, because I mean, they're in the same position. And from numbers wise, it's across the state. This is happening in corrections all over. The biggest amount of, I know is King County. They're over 100 positions down. It's just people, they leave, they want to, go for better benefits, better money, and sometimes it's the place, where they're working that determines where they go. So hope that answers your question.
It does. It gives me a better feel. I talk to commissioners in the other 39 counties pretty frequently through WASAC, so I hear a lot of their struggles, and a lot of what we're experiencing here, I think, is happening, I know is happening at other similar counties. Our issues are much different than what we see in Pierce, Snohomish, and King.
Right.
It's the same kind of problem, but the scale is dramatically different, and the wages are different, and the quality of life for some people in King County is better than here, and for other people, it's not as good as
Not as
here.
good.
So there's a lot of reasons people
That's
move.
true.
Yeah, I think we know that. We had a recent request from the assessor to take a position to a step 6, and we declined that. And so what I'm thinking through here is, okay, I want to be fair and equitable to all of our departments. If we said no to the assessor's office, what would be the basis for saying yes to corrections? And to me, that looks like your staffing shortage is significantly, percentage-wise, higher than the assessor's office, meaning you've got a much bigger void. I know from some background research that recruiting female corrections officers is especially difficult now.
Yes, it is.
more difficult than recruiting people to work in the assessor's office. And that's not a value judgment about which is more important. It's an observation of what the marketplace looks like currently. And while I haven't looked lately at what the hourly rates are at Target, the mere fact that an hourly rate at Target is anywhere close to what we would be paying somebody to work in a high-risk environment, a critical environment like corrections is disturbing,
Yes,
I
it
think
is.
is the word.
It is.
And this request, going from a 3 all the way to a 6, adds about 9,200 for the entire year, you said. Okay. I think I'm going to pause in case other people have questions. Thank you.
Would this individual be eligible for the $5,000 retention that we just passed?
Yes.
Well, the $5,000 retention was put out there to give everybody time to wait for the consort study to be done. So, although I recognize the need, but the whole purpose of the $5,000 retention was to give us time. And anyways, that's my thoughts on it, because we keep getting people coming forward with one-offs and approvals, but that kind of defeats the whole purpose of the retention. Just trying to be fair and equitable to everybody. Although I do definitely see the need and the understanding, so thank you.
So Commissioners, before you make your decision, there's money in the budget to cover this request, and there'll be money in the budget next year to cover this request. Just kind of a historical overview. At last count, I think we're to 36 corrections officers that have left, and we keep track of all those type of things. This individual, one is a female, and for PREA designations, for all kinds of reasons, a female corrections deputy is much more valuable than a run-of-the-mill corrections deputy for a day. And so to lose that person impacts what takes place. So every day, at any given time, ideally, what you want is you want 4 female corrections deputies, 2 to 4, available on each of the 5 shifts to handle female inmates, those type of issues. So in the jail setting today, Adams County doesn't have a jail. I hold their contracts and we house their inmates because of what's taking place. So there's lots of different things that come into play. Like our inmate population today is at 227 with 12 vacancies roughly right now, some being filled, some not being filled. This individual here not only has Core Corrections Academy, has the State's Corrections Academy, is a female, and she's going to jump ship and go to Bend County where she can make more money. That's the bottom line. And so when you make your decision, it's got nothing to do with the CARES money that you're trying to deal out. This is about retaining an individual that has the skill sets that we need right now under the current operating conditions of the jail. Females are a commodity. She's a good female corrections deputy with all the skill sets that we need. And she lateraled over, and when she lateraled over from the Department of Corrections, she took a pay cut coming and doing that. We talked with her, and I brought her to a 3, and then I gave, her incentives and those type of things. But at the end of the day, she's worth that money. But you can vote how you want, but in the end, what you're going to do is you're going to lose a valuable corrections employee that has skill sets that we are understaffed in right now.
So, Sheriff, am I hearing you say that the incentive payment that was just passed a few minutes ago is not going to be sufficient to retain this employee?
Well, if she's going to leave, one, she's not going to get the money. Two is if she decided to stay, her decision to stay and not look elsewhere is to move from a step 3 to a step 6. She's completed her probation, all of those issues. So it's not about the $5,000. It's about moving her in a pay scale from whatever she's making.
I got that. So,
Yeah.
so
And all I have to do is take her position and move it into one of my senior step positions, line items. And there really is no impact other than shuffling a name from a senior step 6 into a vacant position of step 6. And move it
got
around.
all that. But the question was, is the 5,000 by itself not sufficient to retain this employee?
It's not.
Okay.
She's going to go elsewhere.
Knew the answer, but didn't want to speak for you. So if this individual had come to work at Franklin County from day one and had been working here for the 4 years, what step would this person be at?
She'd be a top step.
She'd
Or
be,
no, she'd be 2 steps
Two
off
steps
top.
off, yeah.
She'd be at, well, she'd be at a 5 probably. Yeah.
and would you consider her experience at Coyote Ridge to be year for year equivalent to being here? Would you consider that experience to be more valuable, less value, or equivalent?
Well, more valuable in the sense that she was handling a higher population of inmates, developing skill sets with handling females under PREA conditions, et cetera, and all of those things. She came with a set of skill sets. Maybe this will work. So she came
No,
to us, she
I
came to
got
us
that.
with an Associate of Arts degree in corrections work. And since being here, she's now developed to a bachelor's degree, if you would, in
Yeah.
that sense.
So what I'm formulating is the notion that had this employee started with us and been here for 4 years, she'd be a step 5. The fact that she spent the first 3 years working in a state facility, gaining arguably more extensive, possibly more valuable perspective and experience. And so she comes here, and by virtue of that arguably richer experience, doesn't compete as well for compensation. She'd be a 5 if she'd just done all 4 years here, but I'm guessing that here and now today, if you had a choice between an employee who had done 3 years at Coyote and 1 year here, that would be your preference over someone who'd spent all 4 years here.
Current conditions, absolutely.
Right. So then the argument is if she would have been a 5, had she been here for the full 4 years, I think I could justify saying that a 5 would be reasonable. The 6 gets difficult. Going back to the assessor, we offered a compromise where the person was stepping up in 6 months anyway, which effectively would be very similar to a 5 here.
Well-
I am concerned about one-offs, which is why it's so important to have this detailed conversation about what is the significance of the position, how badly are we hurting, how valuable is the experience, and all these other details have to be glued together. So,
Well, one other comment is you can't compare a corrections deputy to assessor.
well, and I said earlier, I'm not making a value judgment about the two, but looking at it from the marketplace standpoint in terms of which one is higher to recruit and retain, I think it's clear in my mind that it's more difficult to recruit and retain female corrections officers than it is assessors. No disrespect to the assessors, they're critical work as well.
Any questions?
Yeah, I got one. Adams County, when's their contract up, and who negotiates that? Do you, Sheriff?
Well, actually, I had negotiated the contract, but I sent it to you all for approval.
Okay.
So you are the ones that approved the contract.
When is the contract up?
At the end of this year.
End of this year.
So we are looking at higher costs, salaries going up. I think we really got to look at bumping that on Adams County
So
to retain the people we need.
To answer your question, so all bookings, inmate costs and stuff are the same across the state. They're regulated by the state. And so if it costs me $70 to have an inmate in the facility, then that's what it has to cost Adams County to have somebody in the facility. And those are set, those rates are set by the state.
The bed rates are?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you have a bigger contract to develop more money coming up with the city of Pasco than
Good.
Adams County that's coming up with, which is gonna have to reflect those increases, if that's helpful to you, so you understand. Yep.
And I'm more inclined with the 5,000 retention and a step 5. I think that would get her above the 9,000 for the year. That would, so that's sort of the way I'm leaning. Sort of like a compromise here and utilizing that $5,000 retention bonus.
Mr. Chairman, I move for approval of Resolution 2023-202, amended as follows. Change the request from a step 6 to a step 5, otherwise as presented.
Second.
There's been a motion, a second, for Resolution 2023-204 with the revision of a step 5 instead of a step 6. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
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 Aye. That moves us down to public
Jim.
comment. Anybody for public comment? So there is a 3-minute limitation on public comment. Are we going to be good with that?
I hope so.
And
Go for it.
And we can't engage with you during public comment? Okay.
So I'm going to throw an image, Pam Loa, Franklin County Horticultural Pest and Disease Board. And I am going to let Julio throw an image up on the monitor for us. And I'm here more as a public service announcement in collaboration with Washington State Department of Agriculture, and to inform the community that Japanese beetle has been detected in our community, and it is basically also in Benton County. So we are asking the community to help us, don't go away, and be proactive in spotting and reporting the Japanese beetle. And in front of you, I gave you a handout that has information about the Japanese beetle. Julio.
Advance the slide.
So we trapped, so our trappers, being proactive after hearing about Grandview and the quarantine there. So we started trapping our own, and last week we determined and caught a Japanese beetle in the city of Pasco limits and alerted WSDA, which in turn takes the lead because it is an invasive species. And they set up a perimeter, it's like 5 miles out. And I showed you here on the left, that's what the perimeter looks like as far as the trapping. And so they take the trapping site and go out 5 miles and start, their trapping. So now we are in a supplemental support role with WSDA. So we are still setting our own traps. And so if there is another beetle detected, it will start the conversation of a quarantine, unfortunately. So this is what the beetle looks like, and right now the adults are flying, they have a very distinct green head and thorax, and then they have these little white tufts on their abdomen. So if you do see it, the information there is on the lower right-hand side, and it will tell you like who to report to, and then, so what comes up is a quarantine. So just real briefly, a quarantine imposes a restriction of movement of material outside of the quarantine area. So in that gray box, that indicates what is affected by the rule. So yard waste outside the quarantine zone is restricted. And growers that will be affected, so it does, the Japanese beetle does attack the corn silk, okay. And so what you can do is reach out to WSDA, and they can set up improvement plans and treatment plans so you are able to move your product in and out of the zone. So with that, if you have any other questions, like I said, WSDA is taking the lead on this. So any sightings, you can contact us, but in turn, we'll be contacting WSDA anyway. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
This is public comment.
I'd like to make a comment about the public comment.
Okay, go ahead.
I think when you're having people come in who represent a public service board or agency, we ought to treat them very much the same as we do our own departments. The Port of Pasco, the City of Pasco. I don't think this really comes under public comment, although I'm happy to hear about it now. But in the future, I'd like to see us put these kinds of things on the agenda. The issues are significant, and you ought not be limited to 3 minutes in public comment. Just my opinion. Whether it's the Mosquito Board of Fire District, City of Pasco, these are our partners in serving our citizens, and it should go on the agenda for as full a discussion as needed. Thanks.
That was offered to the lady, and she did not want to go through an engagement with the commissioners, so she just wanted to present.
Okay, that's fine.
All right. Anybody else for public comment?
I think when we first received these ARPA funds, that Mr. Johnson, the administrator at that time, had a list of wish projects that were beyond normal funding from the county, helping the city, Basin City, ambulance districts, fire districts. We ended up spending a buttload of money on track. And all these projects, I haven't heard any more about them. All I hear about money going to the employees. I thought the ARPA funds were to be used by the county for special needs and not as employee benefits. We're talking using roughly 20% of this year's ARPA funds that were available to us for retention bonuses or special one-time deal for the district attorney's office. I just wish the money was being spent otherwise until we get this study back on actual needs on the wages. It's just like the school districts from the state after the Supreme Court decision got all the money. So instead of going out and improving the schools or using it to build new ones, they gave all the money away in wages. So that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Anybody else for public comment? Anybody on the phones?
No, sir.
Nobody on the phones? Nobody coming to the mic? We'll move to Commissioner Administrator updates. Mr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I wanted to welcome Teresa Alvarez. She is our new clerk of the board, so really excited to have her. She moved over from the auditor's office, so just really excited, and she completes our team, and honestly, it just, the energy in our office has been transformed, and you talk about morale. I mean, I think it starts in our office and kind of sets the tone for the courthouse. So just really happy to have her, and so really excited. Just on a personal note, I just wanted to thank everybody in the courthouse. Yesterday was my birthday, and we just had so much great food, and Eric from facilities cooked this unbelievable brisket. It was all not taxpayer funded. It was funded by the employees, so they were just so nice and just made me feel great to celebrate my birthday and, the 3-4 months that I've been here. So thank you, everybody, and we had a lot of food and saw a ton of people. As far as my report goes, really excited. We launched the Franklin County Connection newsletter, launched that on Saturday, and this is a fun newsletter that we'll write and give to employees every Monday. Already gotten great feedback from 3 employees. Said, man, this is great. This is something we really need here. So excited about that. I've been working hard with the Hub Benefits team and the brokerage with Margot Wilder and Tim Anderson, just not only looking at it from a contribution perspective, but the fiscal impact that we can have, in terms of finding money for perhaps COLA. This is certainly a place that we could do that. HAPO, the RFP, we received 3 submissions this past Friday on the closing date. So we received some really strong submissions. So excited to go through that process. Today, the HAPO Advisory Committee will meet at 5 o'clock to look at those submissions and take the next steps. Civil service, we've completed that with today's consent agenda, so really excited to have Dwayne Van Beek on board now. So that'll give us 3 civil service commissioners, and so I really love the direction that we're headed in. A really positive direction. So I really feel like we're turning things around there. We've been working with the Sheriff's Office in Lourdes on a sobering center near Lourdes Hospital. So Lourdes, they presented a plan to the Sheriff's Office on providing that resource, and I've been exchanging some emails with Matt Rasmussen from Benton County, and there is another organization that is going to submit, but this is going to be a cost-sharing measure. But it would be great to have the sobering center here. It would be a by-county used facility, and what a sobering center will do, will take individuals who may be on drugs or alcohol, and you don't stick them in the jail setting. It gives them an opportunity to basically dry out, for lack of a better term, and not put our officers at risk. So this would be paid for through the mental health tax, and Tim Anderson just emailed me during this meeting. So we've got $5,305,674 in that account right now, and funding would be utilized through that. Consort study, we've talked about it quite a bit, so we're ready to rock and roll on that front, and start working hard and bring you guys some reports back on that front.
Thank you. Commissioner Peck.
Following last week's board meeting, had a meeting with the electeds, had about a 2-hour plus meeting with the bylaws committee from the State Association of Counties. It's been years since those bylaws have been updated, and so going through those in detail, probably 2 more meetings on that. The impact for Franklin County and all the counties is that the bylaws will establish membership levels on various boards and committees. It'll speak to dues and participation, and most of what I heard in this 2-hour meeting was that bylaws need to be drafted in a way to make sure that the counties have maximum participation and choice, given that it is a county association. Another WASAC meeting yesterday, which is a weekly update. This one was on state dollars for low and middle income housing and homeless housing. A good detailed discussion as to how those funds flow down from the state and principally go to our Human Services Department, which is a bi-county operation run by Mr. Sullivan. And I think that's it for this week.
Commissioner Mullen.
So we had the Benton Franklin Transit meeting. They're starting to advertise events in the community on the sides of the buses. They don't longer advertise on the sides of the buses, so using this to promote local events throughout the community, I think is a good idea. They'll be promoting like the water follies that are coming up. Also, they'll be hosting the state bus rodeo next year on site at the Ben Franklin Transit. Also, this last week had the WASAC meeting on Monday. And just want to announce too that the Franklin County Sheriff's Foundation fundraiser is July 22nd. So if you're interested in that fundraiser, I would reach out to them. And then also the sheriff has his National Night Out coming up in Basin City here in the next couple of weeks. So, and that concludes my report.
My last week was the law library that was, Mr. Davidson and I traveled over to Benton County, but it was canceled. So we sat there and had our own little meeting for a little bit there. But then Port Pasco meeting, Columbia Snake River Irrigators Association meeting. Went with Mr. Gonzalez up to Cooley Flats and toured their dairy up there at Mesa. Didn't even realize they had these going on right now, but they've got a carousel. They call it a carousel, and it's a 120 cow carousel. The cow steps on the carousel. They clean it up. They put the milker on it, and when it makes its loop, it backs out, and it's fully milked. This innovation and creativity is just incredible. It did cost the dairymen $6 million to put in. It was very expensive, but it is aiding in milking more cows more efficiently and quickly. Then after that, we went up and met with Senator Sessler about the .09 funds briefly. Then had the Ben Franklin Transit meeting that night, and then the agenda meeting Friday morning. It was a pretty jam-packed Thursday. So with that, we'll move into the elected and department head. Is there any electeds or department heads that would like to come forward with anything today? I don't see any movement in the room. So if there's no elected or department heads, we'll move down to administration office business. Mr. Gonzalez?
None, sir.
So back to public comment. Anybody for public comment? Nobody on the phone?
No, sir. There's no one on the phone.
Seeing nobody coming forward for public comment, I do believe we have a couple executive sessions under the same RCW, correct?
Yes, Chair. We have two that we can allocate 20 minutes total, probably 10 minutes each. RCW 42-30-110, Section 1, Subsection B, real estate acquisition or site selection.
Okay. So at this time, we will recess into executive session for 20 minutes. No, same RCW. Okay, we've come out of executive session. We're going to extend the executive session. At this time, we'll recess into executive session for another 10 minutes under the same RCW. We come out of executive session, we're back to regular session. Is there any other business for the good of the county?
No, sir, that's it. Thank you.
Chairman, I just have a note. I'll be out next week. My intention is to participate remotely by calling in. If that changes, I'll let the staff know.
All right. If there's no other business for the good of the county, this